Let me begin by stating that monsters exist in this world, and they are not phantoms or demons, but very real people who harbor malevolent intentions. My family has yet to fully recover from the terror we endured last summer, and I fear they may never completely heal. I'll start from the beginning and do my best to recount the story. My wife and I decided to take the kids on a small family vacation, nothing extravagant, just a few nights away by the ocean. I was surprised to discover that finding houses on Airbnb was actually more affordable than the available hotels. My wife found this fantastic place that wasn't directly on the ocean, but was merely a 5-minute walk away, making it significantly cheaper than beachfront accommodations. The house was situated directly at the end of a dead-end street, and behind it flowed a creek, creating a wonderfully private atmosphere. We arrived at the beach town in the mid-afternoon and spent several hours at the beach before heading to the house. My son was 8 and my daughter 13. Normally, they bickered constantly, but something about being by the ocean made them play together like truly good siblings. This would likely be the highlight of the trip, as things began to go downhill from there. We reached the house at 5 p.m. and unpacked our bags. The kids claimed their rooms, and we all cleaned up after our day at the beach. My wife had brought a plethora of meals to cook, saving us from having to dine out every night. She loves to cook, which I appreciate immensely. There truly is nothing better than a home-cooked meal. Our arrangement is simple. She cooks and I do the dishes. It seems like a fair trade-off. That night, we stayed up for a few hours playing Uno, and then eventually went to bed. I slept like a baby that night. I only wish I could say the same for my son. The next morning, he looked utterly exhausted at breakfast, barely touching his food. When I asked him what was wrong, he simply put his head down, silent, almost appearing embarrassed. After a bit of gentle prying, he finally relented and told me what was bothering him. He claimed to have seen ghosts the previous night. Yes, you heard me correctly. My 8-year-old son claimed to have seen ghosts. When I pressed him for more details, he explained that he saw shadows moving around in the backyard. He looked out the window and observed several shadows approaching the house, disappearing for a while, and then eventually retreating back into the tree line, which was just before the creek. He said one of the shadows even turned around at one point and waved at him. Whatever he saw, or whatever he thought he saw, it clearly terrified him. My wife, daughter, and I all tried to reassure him with the "ghosts aren't real" talk. It took a little while, but he eventually started acting like himself again. We went to the beach that day and had another enjoyable time together, riding waves and building sandcastles. When we returned to the house, I noticed that the door wasn't locked. I asked my wife if she had locked it, and she wasn't sure. I'm compulsive about locking doors, and, unfortunately, she isn't. I would have been more annoyed, but everything of value we had was with me. After a quick walk around the house, nothing seemed out of place. Another evening of cooking and card games followed, and then the kids went to bed around 10 p.m. My wife and I stayed up a bit longer, enjoying a few drinks. I didn't note the exact time, but I'd say it was nearly midnight when my son knocked on our bedroom door. He could barely speak, trembling with fear. He whispered, "The ghosts are back, and they're in the backyard again." I sprang up and peered out all the windows, seeing nothing. I kept asking him to point them out, but he was too scared to even look out the window. The only thing that was admittedly a little odd was that the backyard floodlight was on, but that could have been triggered by anything, the wind or even an animal. I spent the next few minutes trying to comfort him and assure him everything was okay. When he finally spoke again, he barely managed to get the words out. He said one of the ghosts had tapped on his window, and told him that if he screamed, they would hurt his entire family. According to my son, he asked the ghost to leave him alone. Apparently, the ghost said he would leave him alone if he opened the door. Instead of opening the door, my son came to wake us up. I was scared, not because I believed in ghosts, but because something was clearly terrifying my poor son. I considered that perhaps my daughter had shown him a movie he wasn't supposed to see, or maybe he was simply homesick, as he hadn't traveled much with us as a family. That night, he slept with us, and I didn't sleep very well because I could feel him shaking all night. The kid was genuinely scared out of his mind. At breakfast, it was the same as the day before. He barely touched his food, looking as though he might collapse into his scrambled eggs. I proposed an idea to him and the rest of the family. We could have a camp out in the living room, building a fort and all sleeping together, like a family sleepover. The kids loved it, especially my son. If he was going to see the ghosts tonight, at least I'd be there with him. We played games for a while, but eventually we all fell asleep. At 2:30 a.m., my son was shaking me awake, saying the ghosts were outside. I got up, expecting to see nothing, and I couldn't have been more wrong. At the sliding door were 3 hooded figures, wearing creepy black masks with bulging white eyes that almost resembled golf balls. I shouted some kind of nonsensical sound out of fear, which woke up my wife and daughter. As soon as they saw the masked figures, they began to scream and shout. During all the commotion, I saw one figure attempting to open the sliding door, but thankfully it was locked. My daughter, thinking quickly, called 911, grabbed a large walking stick that was inside the house and approached the door. I realized that if they had real weapons, the walking stick would be useless, but I was in fight-or-flight mode and had to protect my family. I started yelling at them to leave my family alone. They seemed to be taunting me, almost as if they were enjoying the mental anguish they were inflicting on my family. The person on the left side of the door pulled out what looked like a knife and began waving it back and forth. My family was in tears, continuously screaming for their lives. I'll never forget those horrible screams. Then, out of nowhere, almost like a scene from a movie, I saw the person at the far end tackled by a police officer. The other 2 sprinted away but didn't get very far, as they were also apprehended by the local police force. They were arrested, and when I saw the faces under the masks, I was almost more afraid. They were 3 young men, just normal-looking guys. I found out months later that 2 of them were 20, and 1 was 18. My son thought these 3 masked men were ghosts because it was dark and they were dressed in all black. When they were apprehended, I was informed that all 3 of them had a knife on them, not just the one guy who displayed his. I'm convinced these random young men were targeting us specifically, considering they kept coming back. After talking extensively with local law enforcement, it turns out there's a group of punks in the area that target tourists, especially families. I guess they assume that tourists with families have more money and, with kids present, are easier targets. The police weren't overly concerned, which made me fear that this happens all too often. It makes me sad and angry that these types of people exist in the world. You hear stories like this all over the internet, but you never think it could happen to you, especially on vacation. The police seem to believe that they wouldn't have physically harmed us and only wanted our money, but no one truly knows what they were capable of doing if they had managed to get through that sliding door. Not to mention, the mental scars we acquired from this trip will last a lifetime. Sometimes the mental scars are far more painful than the physical ones. I don't actually know what became of these men, and thankfully, I'll never find out, because I will never be returning to that Airbnb or that beach town for the rest of my life. In moments of fear, uncertainty, or danger, Reciting Ayatul Kursi acts as a powerful shield. It reminds us that Allah is the ultimate protector over all things. Recite it after every prayer, before sleeping, and when leaving home. No harm can touch you when Allah's protection surrounds you.